now we're going to go over the install. First off, we got to get the stock ECU out of this truck. Once we get it out, we can put the Pulsar to the ECU and put it back in the truck. So we're going to go step by step on how to do this process. The first thing we got to recognize is what year truck this is. That's going to base on the rivets, it's going to base on the zip ties or the bolt in the ECU, as well as the TCM connector. On this 2017, the TCM connector is actually connected to the fan shroud. So we found on this one's 2017, we can disconnect this connector on the TCM. With this connector, there are two locking places. On all four of these connectors in here, there's two locking points. There's a tab that we got to pull up, and then once we pull it up, we're going to push it in and then lift the big locking bracket up. That will unlock the ECU connector and we can pull it right out. So right now I'm going to do the TCM connector first. Got the TCM connector off. I'm going to put it out of the way over here, and then I'm going to come into these push tabs where the TCM cable is coming down and is hooking in the top of the ECU. Those push tabs, we're just going to basically pull them out of that tab lock to get them out of the way. So now we have this TCM cable out of the way. Okay, like we said before, on the 2017, that TCM connector is going to come off. On the 2018 and 2019, we're just going to unclip these zip locks, pop them out of the way, so we're going to be able to move the ECU up. Now that we have those, we're actually going to go down and start disconnecting the connectors on the ECU. There's three main connectors, like we did on the TCM connector there. We're actually going to push that tab up to unlock it, and then when we push it in and pull the lever over, that will unlock the tab, pull it off, and we get that out of the way. This front one, we're going to unlock it, and we're going to lay it over a little bit towards the fan shroud to try to hold it from falling down through the engine compartment a little ways. If so, you might have to reach down and fish it out. So the first one we're going to do, while the ECU is there in stock, we're going to reach down there and get that first connector towards the front of the fan shroud. Now this middle connector. So on this one, we actually got to move the ECU to the front, lift it up out of the tray a little bit, and then we're going to drop it down low. And the reason why we're dropping it down low is we're going to get that connector down below the power steering line so we can actually unsnap the lever and to remove it. So I'm going to move it up. I'm going to lower it here. Okay. Now I have that middle connector disconnected. It's hanging down there. And now in step 3, and be able to lift this whole connector, hold it. All right, so now we have the front two connectors off. We're going to get that third connector off. Basically, we're going to lift the ECU up. Be careful when you're lifting it up that you don't hit the power steering lid, catch your connector on it. Just come up. This front radiator hose right here, you're actually going to have to lift this up out of the way a little bit to pull the ECU out so it clears. So what we're going to do is reach down in here, grab our ECU, lift this hose up, make sure it's not hitting. Now we have our ECU and expose that third connector. Same thing here, I'm going to pull that connector down, out of the way, push it in, unlock it. That lever will come over, push it all the way down, replace it right there so it don't fall too low. Now we have our stock ECU out of the truck. Now let's go show you how the Pulsar goes onto it. Bring it back to the truck, install it the same way we just took this one out. Pulsar's ready to go. All right, so right now we went ahead and pulled the ECU out of the Duramax here behind us. I'm going to show you a couple quick things. So the ECU actually sit like this in there. If you see these brackets around here, they kind of come in place depending on what year truck you have. So this one here is a 2017. The ECU will actually sit into a bracket in the truck, and it'll actually sit in there nice and tight. There's a zip tie on the front of the bracket here, as well as a zip tie that's going to go over and around that bracket that it sits in the truck in. We're going to cut those two zip ties off the 2017. On the 2018, it's going to have a little Christmas tree type bracket or a Christmas tree plug right here that we're going to unplug that, and then we're going to be able to take the plugs off and pull the ECU out. On the 2019, it's actually going to have a bolt in here, and the bolt holds it in place. So when we pull all that stuff out, save that stock bolt, that Christmas tree bracket, so in case you want to put the stock ECU back into place, you can do that. But when we put the Pulsar in here, the Pulsar with it, we're going to actually use these stock brackets that we provide to go with it that will hold it in place. So you don't need to readjust your zip ties or put the bolts back in place. Just use our stock brackets, follow the instructions on how it mounts in there. But we're going to show you how to do that here in 1 minute. So this is the L5P ECU. You have two black connectors and you have the blue connector over here. As you notice, the Pulsar only has two connectors on each side. you can see the male and female connectors on each side of the Pulsar. That's how we're going to connect into it. So with the ECU sitting flat on a table, we're going to be able to put the Pulsar onto it. The blue connector should still be showing. This is a very, very important part of the process, and you want to make sure you be able to have it on a flat part of the table, flat surface, that you can put a little bit of power to it. So you want to make sure these two brackets go straight onto the ECU itself. I like to kind of hold my finger down here and feel where it's going, and it kind of slides into place. As you can see, it's a little loose, but it's inside the ECU itself. So now is where you really need a good sturdiness. You need to apply a little pressure. Don't feel like you're going to break stuff. It's going to apply the pressure to it. When we do it, we want to evenly provide pressure on both sides of the Pulsar itself. So once we have it pretty flat, we're going to push down here in the back piece. All right, now we got the back piece in place here a little bit. We're going to push that front. Same thing, hands evenly placed, pressure even. We're going to push it down there. And it clips into place. We're going to secure it, push all the way around it, make sure it's really in place there. Now we're good to go. It is very important that we really focus on pushing this thing down evenly on both sides until you hear the click. If it hasn't clicked, it hasn't gone down far enough. So you really got to put a little pressure on it. Do not put pressure on the connectors here, because that puts it on the board and not the connectors. We want to push it on the case of the Pulsar here and up here to where you have a good solid base and connect this into it. But as you can see now, the Pulsar is connected to the stock ECU. So we're going to talk about how we uninstall the ECU and how we install this back in there. So now we have the Pulsar onto the stock ECU. If you hold it up this way, you can see the Pulsar's at the top. That's the top of the ECU. That's going to use the big bracket. The bottom down here is going to use the smaller bracket. So the easiest way to put these on is turn the Pulsar back over on its face down. Remember the orientation of the top part. There. So I have the top part facing away from me, the bottom part here. I'm going to spin around here and show you this bottom part bracket. You'll see there's two holes in here. It'll clip onto the ECU. Those holes will match up to the brackets on there. We'll take our screwdriver, put them in there. Once you get them on, we'll twist them down until they're tight. Okay. Want them nice and tight. Don't over tighten and strip the screws, but make sure they're nice and tight on there. We're going to rotate it around. So we're going to take the top bracket, do the same thing. Get our screw. This top flange is going to hang onto the top part of the ECU. The bottom one's going to go into the hole here. Okay, the other one here. And we'll crank these down and tighten them as well. Again, don't over tighten, strip them, but make sure they're nice and snug so they stay connected and secure in the truck. So now you can see our two brackets are holding the ECU together and the Pulsar together, and we're able to put it down in. In the truck itself, there is a bracket that's holding this in there. This bracket here will sit into there. That will secure the ECU from falling down to the bottom. And then these two top pieces will actually use these other supplied bolts there to connect in there, and that's going to hold it secure up top as well. And then you'll have your three connectors on the front of it holding it secure there. So we'll go ahead, we'll actually show you how to install it back into the truck, and then we go over the functionalities of the Pulsar inside the truck and how to adjust those features. All right, so we went ahead and installed the Pulsar to the stock ECU. We added the brackets on the bottom, the bracket on the top so we can secure the Pulsar to the ECU, and when we put it in here, we can secure it there. So just like the steps in installing it, we're just going backwards through it. So we're going to take that main big connector, right here. I'm going to install it straight on. Make sure these connectors go straight into it. Push it all the way in. Once we have it in, a key to these, lifting these levers, is give it a little assistance on pushing it in at the same time you're pulling the lever up. You'll be able to go until it clicks, push your locking tab up. Now that connector is installed there. So now we're going to slide the ECU down in that hole. Same way we did it before. We're gonna lift this tube right there out of the way. Gonna kind of put it down through there. Again, watching, make sure it doesn't hit that power steering pump tab. Okay, now we have it down into the spot. But remember, on the second connector, we actually have to drop it below the power steering tube to get that second connector on. So right now, I'm gonna lower it even lower to get that second connector put back on. So now we have that middle connector on. We're gonna pull the ECU back up, slide it to the front, and put on the last connector in the front. Once we do that, we can put the ECU in place and start getting it locked in there. Okay, pulled it up, grab my connector. I kind of left in the fan shroud area so it didn't fall too low. Put it on. Same thing, once you get it leveled in there, push it in, pull the lever over, and you can hear it right there, snap into place, push your locking tab down so it stays locked up. All the levers are there. So now we're gonna lift the ECU and kind of angle it back towards the driver's side, because on the back side of that little box, there's a little brackets that's gonna go into it. And we're gonna sit down in the bottom, and then we can hit our two top 10mm bolts to lock it in place. Okay, we got the back part locked in, the bottom part locked in, the bolts are lined up. So 10mm bolts right here we showed you earlier. We're gonna put them in the connector, careful not to drop them. You have a washer, put that on the front side of it. And your nut here, put it on the front side. I like to get them started, so when I use my socket and my wrench, they go in nice and easy. They are locking washers, so they can only go so far with your finger tight. We got that side in, we're gonna do the same side to here. Bolt, washer, nut. Okay, got those two right there. All right, got the first bolt in. Take our next bolt, put it in the front part here. Same thing, gonna put through the back side. Goes through the hole. Got it in place. Put our washer on. Put our lock nut on. And twist it to where I can't twist it anymore. Okay, they're both finger tight. Now I'm gonna take my 10mm socket and wrench and tighten those up. All right, got both connectors, both bolts in there, everything's tight. I'm gonna do a check over here, make sure our tabs are down, they're locked in place. Feels good there. Now on the 17, I'm gonna put the TCM connector back in right here, around underneath the hose. Put it in. Nice and tight, flip the lever down, lock it in, push the lock down. And just like that, the Pulsar is installed. Now we can get ready to go use the product. All right, so now we just went ahead and installed the Pulsar on this Duramax. We're gonna come in here and use the steering wheel controls to show you the 3 features with the Pulsar that you can do. The one is changing the power levels on the fly. The second is changing high idle. And the third is tire size. So let's focus on changing the power levels. Like we discussed earlier, you're gonna use the plus or minus on the cruise control setting on your steering wheel. The minus will go down in power levels, the plus will go up. So we hit it one time, your speedometer will change to 10 miles per hour for about 3 seconds and then go back to your operating speed, which in this case, we're actually going 0, so it went back to 0. If I hit it twice, it's gonna go up to 3 because we're going from 1, and then we go 2 more, so power level 2, power level 3, which is gonna indicate 30 miles per hour. And again, if we could do twice more, we're gonna go up to power level 5. Now, if we are driving down the road at 70 miles per hour and want to see what power level we're in, simple as that. With the cruise control off, we hit the cancel button, and the speedometer is going to go up to that power level indication of the ARP speed. So in this case, we're in power level 5. It showed 50 miles per hour, and then we'll go back to your operating speed. If we want to go back, just hit the power level button, go all the way back down to 0. Now we're back to stock power of this Duramax L5P. So now we just showed you how to change the power levels when you're driving down the road. So let's show you how you're going to change your tire size. For example, this truck has aftermarket tires on it, so we want to put the right tire size in it. So first step you're going to do is measure your tire size. You're going to measure that from the ground up to the top of the tire. This tire measured out as a 35 3/8 inch tire. So we're going to write that down, make sure we can enter that in here. So now we know our tire size, we're going to enter in the truck. The first thing I want to do is if your truck has a heads-up display in the middle and you can display your mile per hour, let's toggle to that screen. So what we're going to do is use your right hand up and down arrow keys or left and right and go to the one that says mile per hour. Okay, I got my mile per hour speed screen displayed in the middle of my tachometer and my mile per hour gauge. At this point, I'm going to hold the cancel button for about 10 seconds. The speedometer gauge should go up to 140 miles per hour, and I can let go. Now it's going to go down to whatever mile per hour or tire size is currently in the vehicle. This truck currently has a 32-inch tire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change by the up and down power levels or the up and down cruise control features like we use for the power levels to change the tire size. So I'm going to enter up and go to my 35. This is why we recommend using the digital gauge versus the needle gauge because it's a little bit easier to follow through. But you can use either gauge depending on your application. Once I have it at 35, I'm going to hit the cancel button. Now it's going to go to the point side. We're not going to round up, we're just going to round it right to that even point. So this was a 35 3/8, which is a 35.375. So we're going to do a 35.3. So I'm going to hit the plus up to 3, so it's 3 miles per hour is our 0.3. I'm going to hit the cancel button again. It's going to go up to 140 miles per hour. Now it should go back down to 0. That's entered, that's saved. So our tire size is entered at 35.3 inches. By doing that, now our speedometer is right, our transmission shifts correctly, the ECU and the TCM is all in sync when we're driving down the road with the performance levels. All right, so we've done the power levels, we've done the tire size. Now I'm going to set my high idle. So in this case, if I want a truck to warm up a little bit quicker when it's outside, say it's in the cold weather, this is where you can set your high idle. Again, it changes the RPMs when the truck's in park. Once the truck is started, leave it in park. You're going to hit the cruise control on button. At that point, the Pulsar actually indicates that the vehicle is in high idle mode. So the Pulsar is sensing this and will put your truck in high idle mode. Once you put the cruise control on, now you can hit the plus or minus cruise control buttons to change it. So if you hit plus on the cruise control, it's going to raise your idle 100 RPMs. Hit plus again, it'll go up another 100 RPMs. If you go down minus, it's going to go down 100 RPMs. So at this point, you can set your high idle. If you're done with your high idle, or you want it to turn off, simply hit the cancel button on your cruise control or push on the brake, and the Pulsar will indicate that it needs to turn high idle feature off. So we're going to start the truck and set a high idle. Okay, so right now the truck's idling about 650 RPMs. We're going to hit the cruise control button on. The indicator will come on the bottom of the dash. Now that it's in high idle mode, we're going to start changing the idle so you'll hear the engine rev higher. So now it's sitting about 1,000 RPMs. This is your high idle mode. Again, if we want to lower it, hit the cruise control down. One tap is 100 RPMs. Press and hold it, and it'll go down faster. If I get in the truck, the high idle's warmed up, we want to end it, we either hit cancel or push on the brake. And now we're out of high idle mode. Now that your high idle mode is off, put the truck into gear and drive down the road.